All right, hello again. This is Jeff Scott. I've been talking JavaScript courtesy of Muroc's JavaScript 2nd edition, and we're up to Chapter 6, which is the end of Section 1 of the text, How to Test and Debug a JavaScript Application. Some of the stuff in here may sound new, and there may be some things in here too that may, for lack of better words, may sound just like common sense. Use top-down coding and testing to simplify debugging. Use Chrome's developer tools. And just so you know, if for some reason you're not a Chrome person, if you're an IE person, or if you're a Firefox person, or a Safari person, they have equivalents to developer tools. Most of the time, whatever browser you're in, if you look at the keyboard at the top of the screen and you press the F12 key, it will open up. It's called Chrome Developer Tools in Chrome. And as an example, it's called Firebug in Firefox. Now, you may have to install it too, and if you do, they'll give you steps. It's very simple to do. But we want to use the Chrome Developer Tools to debug apps by setting breakpoints, viewing the value of data items, and stepping through statement execution. Trace the execution of an app via console.log. View source code for a web page, view changes to the DOM, validate the element for a web page that seems useful. Again, use top-down coding, Chrome Developer Tools, trace execution, view source code, view changes, validate, and describe 3 of the typical test phases. Distinguish between syntax, runtime, and logic errors. Describe the type of debugging problem that can occur due to the imprecision of floating point numbers. Finally, describe the type of debugging problem that can occur because JavaScript treats undeclared variables as globals. Now again, like I said, some of the stuff in here might sound a little different, might make sense, or may sound off the wall. The goal of testing: to find all the errors before the app is put into production. That might make sense. The goal of debugging is to fix all errors before the app is put into production. As a developer, especially the farther along you get in the process, every time you find a bug, especially a bug that you're able to fix, that should actually be considered a victory. Because it's much better that you find the bug than some end user find the bug. Okay? Test the application. So this is what you want to do. All right? First of all, you want to make sure the app works the way it's supposed to. For example, with a miles per gallon. Okay? Test it with all the valid data that you can think of to make sure the results are correct. Now, there's no way, let's say, even in the miles per gallon, let's assume that you're going to allow somebody to type in a number up to 1 million, let's just say, for the miles driven. And for gallons, maybe up to 100,000. Think of all the different possibilities. You couldn't sit there and test every single value. But often you come up with a test bed or a lot of tests with valid input to and so you know that the stuff works correctly. After you do that, test it with invalid data. So to make sure proper error messages are displayed and the app doesn't fail. So if you're not allowing negative numbers, put in a negative number and see if the program handles it correctly. If you've got maximum numbers that you're allowing for miles driven, miles per gallon, or whatever, go beyond that and see what happens. Then after that, after you've done those two, testing with valid input data and testing with invalid input data, then try everything you can think of to make the application fail, like unusual or unexpected combinations of user actions. Let me give you an example. Years ago, my older brother Dick, was working as a comptroller for an air filter corporation in Milwaukee. And what they were using, the software they were using, they had went and bought from an independent company. I don't want to mention the company or anything about it because I don't know that much about it myself. But somehow, one of the secretaries was working and managed to accidentally, she had a book up above on a ledge where she was working. The book fell off and it hit the keyboard. Unbeknownst to her, and pretty much unbeknownst to everybody in the company, what that did was that goofy key combination with what she had up, it removed 2 customers from their database. All right. Now, luckily for them, they backed up their database 2 or 3 times a day, so they lost some stuff that they had to go in and redo, but it wasn't anything that was earth-shattering. All right. But the people who created that particular application never thought of testing whatever that key combination was, evidently. All right. So, the 3 types of errors, those being syntax errors, runtime errors, and logic errors. Syntax errors are the easiest to spot, and they're usually the easiest to fix because it's an error in the language. And what I mean is you spell var wrong. Someplace where you need to put in a semicolon, you leave it off. You spell function wrong. Something like that. You have 12 left curly braces and 13 right curly braces, or vice versa. Something like that. These errors are caught by the JavaScript engine. And you've seen that in many of the examples that I put in here so far, that I just get no output. And that's typically due to some kind of a syntax error. Runtime errors, you don't know that it's an error until the page has been loaded and the application runs. So when there's a runtime error, what the JavaScript engine does is it throws an error that typically stops program execution. Finally, our logic errors. They don't cause any kind of syntax problems or runtime problems. They just produce wrong results. For example, if you were trying to add 2 numbers, but you accidentally put a minus sign. And believe it or not, the logic errors are the hardest to find because most of us think that we're infallible. I can't tell you the number of occasions where I've had somebody come over and ask me for help, and I walk over there to help them, and at least sometimes can find the error in their code, point it out to them, and they go, "Oh, geez, I didn't do that." Well, it's not like some gremlin came and was working on your code. All right, yes, you did, or didn't. You left something off or whatever. So again, the goal of testing, find all errors before you put it into production. The goal of debugging, to fix all those errors. And the test phases are test with valid data, test with invalid data, try to make it, then literally try to make the app fail any way you can. 3 types of errors, again, are syntax, which are errors in the rules of the language, runtime, which occur after the page is loaded and the application is running, and logic errors. To test a JavaScript application, you run it to make sure it works perfectly, no matter what you enter or what events you initiate. When you debug the app, again, you find and fix all the errors or bugs as best you can. So we've already talked about this a little bit, but notice here, the calculation shouldn't be done if there isn't an entry in the second box. So you said you drove 273 miles, but you didn't see how many gallons of gas you used. So as you can see there, it comes up with what? It comes up with NaN. All right. Here are some common syntax errors, and that one I'm always hit by. Yeah, most people are used to putting ID in caps, the I and the D, but it's like this. If you put it get element by ID in caps, you're going to get an error. Omitting parentheses, quote marks, braces, etc. Opening it with a double quote, closing it with a single quote. All right, forgetting a semicolon. Most of these are things I already mentioned to you. Referring to an HTML attribute incorrectly. And there's an example right there. not testing to make sure that a user entry is the right type before processing it. And the one thing below it is an example, not using parse int or parse float. Using one equal sign, which means, again, assignment, and not using two equal signs, which is used for equality. And as we'll learn later, there's even a three equal signs for equality and identity. I should mention right here, see if I've still got it here. I don't know if I put it here or not. So this might be all for naught. All right, I thought I had an article that I put out here that was on JavaScript errors, but evidently I didn't put it out there. I hope I still have it. And if I do, I'll try to remember to put it out there. Okay, all right. Problems with floating point arithmetic. You may or may not be aware of this, but if floating point are, just basically decimals, things after a decimal. In many computers, if you try to add 0.1 plus 0.1 plus 0.1 10 times, you won't get 10. Or I'm sorry, you won't get 1. All right, so if you add the equivalent of 1/10 10 times, so 0.1 plus 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 0.1, you would think you'd get 1.0. But typically, you'll get something like 0.999936785. And that's because in a computer, floating point arithmetic is imprecise. As they mentioned, one way around this is, especially if you're working with just two decimal places, to use the two fixed, which I've mentioned to you already. All right. Again, if you don't declare strict mode and you assign a variable that hasn't been declared, so if you look here, we've got sales tax with a big T and here with a little t. So if you don't have the use strict at the top, this makes two different variables. So as the author says here, the solution is to always use the declare strict mode at the top. All right. How top-down coding and testing can simplify debugging. One way to simplify debugging is to code and test just a small piece of code at a time. This is referred to as top-down design and testing or just top-down testing. The idea is you test the most important stuff first and then work your way down to the least important. But again, as I mentioned to you before, code a little, test. Code a little more, test some more. Again, because when you use top-down coding and testing, all right, you end up testing a small portion of code, and then you build on that, and then you add a little more, test it again, and add a little more, and test again. This simplifies debugging because you know that the errors are caused by the line you just added. And hopefully, you got something out before when I went and commented out all those function calls that I made and then took the comments out one at a time and worked my way down to show you what was happening. Now, starting on page 182 and going up to about page 190 or so, they talk about debugging, and first they mention the Chrome developer tools, and that's actually the one that I'm going to use. All right, so again, there's top down, there's no data validation, then they add some, etc., and they work their way down. All right, again, you should be able now to understand these terms that you do test and why you test. Again, the difference between testing and debugging, what a bug is, an exception that can be thrown, how to throw an error, what strict mode is, and now, because we just went over it, what top-down coding and testing are. All right, so let's bring up this calculate miles per gallon, and we can look at some of the stuff that's in there. Okay, so it's the calculate miles per gallon, and I decided to bring up the one from chapter, let me move this, the one from here from chapter 6, I put this stuff in. So the miles per gallon, and there it is. Okay, so I'm going to run this in Chrome. And there you see it. I'm going to bring up the Chrome Developer Tools by hitting the F12 key. You saw that before as well. Now in Chapter 1, you were introduced to the console panel of Chrome's Developer Tools as a way to find errors. But there's a lot more stuff in it than that. All right. They mention in the book, they say that the Chrome Developer Tools are fairly easy to use. Well, they're not, but they are at least somewhat intuitive. But it's like anything else. It's an acquired skill. All right, I talked about the F12 key, and that's a way. There's other ways to open it up, but I'm trying to give you what I think are the easiest ways of doing things. One of the primary uses of Chrome's Developer Tools is to get an error message when JavaScript throws an error. To get an error message, you open up Developer Tools, you click on the Console tab to display the console panel, which will show the error message. Then you can click on the link to the right, and it'll show you where the problem is. Well, if we run this, all right, and I'm going to put in here just what they put in the book, 273, and then I'm going to click Calculate MPG. All right, both entries must be numeric. Well, you can see that. All right. That's pretty obvious. But then the next one they have you do is they mean here to type in 9.5, which would work just fine. But instead they type in 9-5 and then run the program. All right. Well, in this case it works. And it works because of the goofy way that JavaScript handles things. What JavaScript does, since this is probably a parse float, is it looks and it says, oh, this starts with a number, use that number. Then it sees the next character and it says, it's a minus sign. Well, that doesn't mean anything, so it stops after the 9. But what if I put in here for 9.5? Again, I can put in 9.5 and it'll still work. All right, I still get the answer. But what if I come in here and I type in space 9.5? Still worked, which surprised me. I don't know why it did. All right. But they mention in here, you can open up the console panel by clicking on the console tab. All right, which is right here. All right. You should see an error message like the one on the line above, which shows what caused the error. Well, you can go and put stuff in here. You can literally type things. Notice, alert, hello, and it brings up an alert, okay? But I can also come in here and say, for example, var x equal 10. And it says undefined, so don't worry about it. Var y equal 11. Var z equals x plus y. And it all says undefined. All right, but those aren't errors, because if they were errors, you'd have hyperlinks here. You could click and find out what the problem is. But if I come out here and say alert, not alter, alert, z. All right, notice 21, 10 plus 11. So it held those values. All right. How about if we not leave this blank, but how about if we put in here hello world and we click? Well, we say both entries must be numeric. So this program, this one right here, this is set up pretty well. All right, it pretty well is handled. But what if I create my own little program? All right, and I think we did this to begin with. I'll have to go back and double check. All right, so this one actually is done pretty well. So let's close this. And let's do a file, open, and what's the other one that I put in here? This one that says MPG. All right. Yeah, if it's not a number, miles per gallon, repeat entries. All right, what if we grab this one and we don't do any validation on it? All right, so we just come through here and we tell you to enter something. Like that. So I took out all the validation. Okay, now I'm going to try to run this. Okay, and again, we can bring up our Chrome tools. Now what if we put nothing in here? Nothing in here again. Well, we just get NaN. What I'm trying to do, oh, one or both entries aren't valid. Okay, repeat, no. I'm trying to give you a scenario in here, and I don't know if they gave us one. All right, where we could actually come up with an error. Let's see. Oh, okay. Let's see if we can write some code and actually come up with some kind of an error. So I'll bring that one back up. So I'm going to come up in here and say, let's see, prompt, what's your age? And we'll default it to 21. Okay, there it is. Okay, we'll put in there 21. That's fine. And in fact, we'll say age equal. So I'm going to say var age equal prompt what's your age? 21. All right, same kind of thing. We'll leave it as 21. Now, I want to say if, and what I want to say here is NaN, which looks like that. So if we did not put in a number for age, then what we want to do is we want to do an error message. Okay? But I'm going to purposely put NaN in there incorrectly. Notice the error? Unexpected end of input. And I can click on here and it'll try to show me where it found the problem. Is, and it was spelled wrong. All right? So this is a way that you can go in and debug. I'm trying to recreate what's shown in the book on page 183. What if you've got some code and you want to be able to, for lack of better words, step through your code? Just go through the code to see what the heck is going on. All right? They bring up this email list example. So I'm going to try to do theirs again and see if I can get it to work. All right, so I'm going to close this, file, open. There's the email list. Hopefully this is the one that they're using, but we'll find out. Run in Chrome. Bring up the developer tools. Okay? Again, if you're following along in the book, I'm on page 184. Now what I can do is I can look at the code and I can set what's called a breakpoint in the code. And a breakpoint is a point in the code where execution of the application stops, basically. All right? So I want to click here on the Sources tab, and I want to bring up my index.html. So there it is. All right, and let's bring up the JS. That would make more sense. All right, so let's click right there. You can see what happens. It shows me that I have a breakpoint set right now. So I'm going to leave email address 1 empty. And now I'm going to click join our list. And you may be able to tell if you look on your screen that that line is now in blue. So what happened again is I clicked on the sources tab to display the sources panel. Then I clicked on the JavaScript file that I wanted to debug. Okay, then I clicked on a line number in there where I wanted to set a breakpoint. You can set as many of these breakpoints as you want. And execution stops. After the execution is stopped, like this, what you can do is you can hit the F11 key, so I could hit it right now, which would then step through my code a line at a time. See that? So it's going through the execution of my code a line at a time. I can hit the F10 key, which stands for step over. So I can run any functions that are called without having to step my way through them. I can do a step out, which is a shift F11, which executes the rest of the function without going through it. Or I can hit F8, which means just basically return to whatever you were doing. Now there's more stuff that you can do too. You can take your mouse and you can hover it over a variable name, all right, and you can find out with a variable name if it has a certain value at that time. Well, it's not working, but you're supposed to be able to do that. You can view the current variables under Scope, Variables, Local section in the right-hand pane. So right there. I can set what are called watches on variables. And what that means is I can tell the system that what I want it to do is put a variable in there, and as my program runs, let me know what's going on. So you set a breakpoint on any line except a blank line. When JavaScript encounters a breakpoint, it stops executing the statement with that breakpoint, and it gives you that dark blue arrow. Please read this chapter, especially pages 182 through 186. Now, speaking of that, I have looked online, and I've gone out to YouTube, and I've typed into YouTube here, Chrome Developer Tools tutorial. All right? And there's a lot of stuff out there for that. And if I want to, I can even type in that with JavaScript and get stuff just on JavaScript. I will tell you that many of the ones that are in here that are even good, if they're really short, like 5 minutes or less, it's going to be hard to get a lot out of them because they are that short. But if you look through enough, you're going to find a few of them at least that are probably going to be pretty long. Here's one that's 26 minutes long. Now, it's 3 years old, but most of the stuff will probably be pretty relevant. All right? On page 186 and 187, they show how to do debugging. It's the equivalent stuff, but in IE. I'm not going to run through that because you can take a look at it if you want. All right? Now, on page 188 and 189, they talk about using the console log function. All right? And on page 189, and let's actually take a look at that. So here's where they put some console logs in. What the log typically will do is when you are in Chrome Developer Tools, and you put in console log statements like this, it will produce output at the bottom of your screen. So a fairly simple way to trace program execution of a JavaScript app is to insert console.log calls at what you consider to be key points. And they show that here. So notice what's going to be printing out. The value of miles, the value of gallons, and what that is. And you can see the stuff in here. So miles, gallons, MPG. So you can take a look at it, and the log statements can display messages that indicate what portion of code is being executed or display values. You could use an alert, but especially if you were in a loop or something, that would be really kind of a pain to do that. Finally, what you can do is you can view your source code, and you may or may not know of this, but you probably do. So if I come back, let's go back to what we were just looking at here. So we're just about done with the chapter. All right, so if I come back here where we were running this, okay, right there. Okay, so if I come through here, and let's put in something that's valid. So I'll put in J. Scott at Blackhawk, same kind of thing again, and Jeff, and boom, and it all worked. That's cool. But when I go back to here, I can right mouse click, which is what I'm doing here, and choose View Page Source, and it shows me the code that's in here as of right now. Now, if I do it afterwards, after I've run this, and I click that, it's only going to show me the page source for thanks for joining our email list. But sometimes viewing the source code will help you because it'll confirm that what you think is being put into values is indeed being put into values. All right. When and how to validate the HTML on pages 192 and 193. All right, this is the last part of the chapter. Again, I go over this in pretty much more detail in the 152, 157 lectures. But if you write something, so let's do this. Let's close all this stuff, everything here. Just close it all. All right, and we're just about through, I think, with the chapter here, so let's double check that. Let me run through this and make sure I didn't miss anything. That's what we're going to go through right now is this validator, so that's what I'm going to go to. Okay, all right, so I think we've gone through everything that's in here. So this is the code for index.html for that email list, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a browser here, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to type into the browser window HTML validator and hit enter. And it says if I go here, which is https://validator.w3.org, then I got two choices. I can come in here and I can grab all this code, copy it to the clipboard, which is what I just did, then come back here and go to validate by direct input, paste it in, and click check. If it comes up green, you can't see it very well down here, but that is green. It means there were no problems. Everything seemed to be, as they say, copacetic. All right. The other thing that I can do, if I don't want to do that, is I can get rid of all this. So I can get rid of everything that's in here totally, which is what I want to do here. All right, it's all gone. Click by validate by file upload. Click there, choose my file. So again, I can tell it to come over here to Muroc.js is where I'm putting this stuff. For example, I'll go to chapter 3 and I'll go to scores.html. Okay, then I can click check. And again, no warnings. But notice if I go back, which is what I'm going to do, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to make some mistakes on purpose. I'm going to spell label wrong. All right, I'm going to spell span wrong. Type here, I'm going to put txt instead of text. Input here, instead of button, I'm going to leave a T off, etc. So you can see what I'm doing here. And I'm going to copy it to the clipboard, and I'm going to come back in here, and I will do it by direct input. Okay, now there are errors in here. So what does this say? Well, notice it's flagging my errors now. It's saying that I basically spell label wrong with label, which means since I spell label wrong, this label end tag doesn't have a beginning tag because I spelled it wrong to begin with. It tells me I spelled span wrong. All right. It says there was an ending form tag, but there are some problems here. So it's trying to show me this, and it's showing me where it considers to be some of the problems that it found. And you can see that already. The label, the span, and the one thing was over here. One of these was from that text. All right. So if I come back and I fix the span, it's also color coded on here, which helps. So I fix the span and I fix the label. But that TXT is still spelled wrong. So I'm going to try one more. I'm going to validate again by direct input. Paste that in. Click check. It's still telling me. See that? TXT and BUTON. So it found those errors now. It was able to find them because I removed the other errors. And again, I come down here and I change that TXT to TEXT. I add my T on the button. I save it. I copy it. I come back here again. Paste it in and check. And boom, it should be green. And it is. So this chapter was meant to give you some introductory tips on using Chrome Developer Tools. I will tell you too, it used to be at least, and I'm going to see if it still is. I've taken probably over 100 courses from a thing called udemy.com. All right, and I'm not sure if it's Udemy or not, so let me log in here. All right, and you can check for their courses over here. So I want to check, I want to search for courses. They used to have one that I think was free on Chrome Developer Tools. How to use Chrome Developer Tools? Well, there's one for $20, but this one's free. Now, I don't know how good it is. Mastering the Chrome Developer Tools. All right. There are 31 little mini lectures. The whole thing is 40 minutes long. And introduction to the tools, how to use them. That would probably help get you started. Now let's hear.
Hi, my name is Flavio, and in this course I will introduce you to the Chrome Developer Tools.
Okay.
I'm really happy to have you here.
Well, you may look at that and say, I wouldn't want to listen to that, but that isn't even really the point. Okay? You learn from where you can learn. You can also, if you don't know this, and you probably do, again, I can go out and type in Chrome Developer Tools tutorial. And there is one under the Chrome itself, which is an overview. They have their own videos. Here's a tutorial from Code School. I think I might have taken this one. I don't remember. But again, play it for free. So you can go through and take a look at that. That is how you learn. I'll be back with the next lecture shortly.